Hi, George. Can you hear me? This is Amy.
We can hear you, Amy.
Ooh, I can barely hear you.
That may have been me. I was leaning back a little bit.
Oh, now I can hear you. City of Aspen or Glenwood host. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Alyssa Owsley. I'm the IT director.
I can barely hear you.
Sumner, I am not sure about Marco, but it is 6 o'clock. So I think Alyssa just made you the co-host.
Well, you're catching me by surprise, of course, but it looks like a pretty easy agenda. So it is 6 o'clock p.m. on January 25th. So I'll call the current Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. And let me pull up my agenda here.
Here comes Marco.
Oh, good. All right. I rescind that. We're not called to order yet. Thanks, Jen.
I think you're muted, Marco.
Can you guys hear me?
A little.
Cool. I cannot hear you, any of you.
We can hear
The
you.
craziest thing just happened. I pulled forward a computer to get a better view, and I unplugged the power cord, and everything died. So my excuse for being late, right here. It's true. It was a bit stressful, but I'm here. I still can't hear you, though.
You can't hear us at all?
All right, give me a second.
Can you hear me now? Test.
I hate Zoom. It's terrifying to unmute.
Marco, can you hear us?
Now? No?
No?
I shall return shortly.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody?
Can
Say
you hear us?
something funny.
Can you hear us?
No.
No.
Nothing.
Okay, I guess have fun. I can't hear you, so I really can't.
So Sumner?
Am I the one that has to do the phone and the video tonight? How does this work again?
You come up to my house.
And maybe
Uh,
somebody type him a message how to get to
Can we
the
just meet down at City
phone.
Hall? It's so much easier. This is silly.
So we don't have the chat capability because because then anybody could chat. And so we just have it not on this.
Can we text them? And tell them
Sure.
what to do?
I think, yes, we'll have to text him because he can't hear us.
We could.
So are we going to
Paper.
proceed without him?
This is really terrible. I see the sound bar moving, but I can't hear anything. All right. Can somebody tell me how I have to do this with the phone so I can hear you at least? I guess you're going to have to text me. Oh, this is terrible.
Team, I will text Marco here and give him the numbers to call in. 1 second.
All right. So shall we proceed without him?
Switch
Yeah.
to phone audio.
All right. So I'll recall this meeting to order as stated before.
Let's see here.
There we go. Let me get the minutes back up here. And let's do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Wissing,
My call cannot be completed as dialed. This isn't meant to be for me. I hexed it. Awesome. All right, next bumper. Hang on.
Commissioner Wissing,
You're muted.
Meeting ID.
Commissioner Schachter,
Present.
You have not entered any number.
I'd suggest we, for purposes of our record, wait until
Yep.
Marco figures this out.
Okay. We are suspended. Thanks, Richard.
I think Marco's muted.
Like someone needs to drive over to his house
Hannah,
immediately.
could you start over, Hannah, on the roll call at least?
Well, I suggested that we wait for Marco. I think just give it a couple of minutes.
Okay, so. Oh. This is awesome. Look, you get me like.
Now you're muted. Now you're unmuted.
It is.
Marco, can you hear us?
Richard, will you drive over there?
I'm like this close.
Okay, Amy,
I'm like-
go get him.
I'm gonna go over there and show you how to use Zoom.
He's going to try again. Marco, can you hear us now?
It's not working. I am going to do a complete restart, and I will see you in a couple of minutes. And if it works, great. And if not, like I said, have a great evening. So I'll see you in a bit.
No, go to Amy's.
I do this every day.
Well, I'd suggest we proceed at least with roll call and minutes, see how Marco does.
Okay,
All right, roll call. Commissioner Wissing,
Present.
Commissioner Schachter,
still present.
Commissioner Sipperly,
Present.
Commissioner Shaver,
Unmute.
Commissioner White,
Here.
Commissioner West,
Present.
and Commissioner Dame. Okay.
Shall we move to seat our alternate commissioner?
Yes.
I move to seat the alternate commissioner, Amy Connerton.
I'll second.
Okay, let's, we can just do this verbally, I believe. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Amy, you're in. Can you hear us now, Marco?
Yes, yes, I'm on the laptop, so now I can actually hear you.
All right, and Marco's here. You're taking over, buddy. We're going to the minutes. We've done the roll call.
Okay, going to the minutes. Hang on, I gotta give me, okay, I'll figure this out, I guess. All right, excellent. Well, sorry about that, but something just didn't quite want to do what I wanted it to do. So, did you guys include me in the roll call?
Yes, you're included.
Okay, I'm officially here. I'm, oh my God, 13 minutes late. That's not in my DNA, so I feel terrible. Moving on to the minutes. Where are we? Number 3 on the agenda. Entertaining a motion to receive the minutes from the December 14th, 2021 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, I gotta see. No, I see none. Okay, so I guess if we see no discussion, I'll call for the questions to receive the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
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 And those opposed? And we'll see none. So motion passes. Thank you. And moving on to item number 4 on the agenda, comments from citizens appearing for items that are not on the agenda. And if you are here and I do not have the current view of attendees, so bear with me here, but please raise your hand. And if anybody sees any hands, let me know. I don't see anything. So closing that item for public comment for tonight and moving on to our first continued item, planning file 5721, part 3, public art master plan implementation.
Good evening, commissioners. Jen Newton, Community Development. I'm here this evening to talk again about the implementation for the public art master plan. And I have a quick presentation, so if you'll just bear with me 1 second, let me get this up there. So the public art master plan was adopted by City Council on October 7th. And the appendix of the plan calls for a proposed path for funding for public art. And Planning Commission discussed the changes to 070 at the end of 2021. And so there are a couple of components to this. The piece that's important to the Planning Commission is that there's a proposed change in 070, which would have an exaction on developers for public art. And at that time, Planning Commission asked us to do, we had brought forward the proposal that was in the master plan. And I think particularly Commissioner Shaver asked us to determine kind of that annual need for funding, kind of back it out and then come up with a proposal. And so staff is recommending that the projects that would be subject to the open space requirement provide public artworks either directly or through a cash in lieu payment. And all of those kind of particulars are in 090, are proposed to be in 090 in the code. But what we are looking at is a per square foot cost for the gross floor area within a development, and that be set by city council. So the proposal is for there to be just one little piece of information that's added to 070 that's in the kind of the exaction section with the fire public fee and the school land dedication, park land dedication, those other fees. And then the rest of the kind of implementation legislation would be proposed to be in 090. So what are we trying to fund? So this is the question that Commissioner Shaver asked. And what we, following that work session, Parks and Recreation and Economic Development staff members determined that, maybe the number that we didn't have a program yet. So we were kind of saying, we think what we'd like to do is have 5 public art pieces a year. And so we reviewed Carbondale and Lafayette's rotating art exhibits because they each have all of those exhibits, the pieces within them are for sale, and came up with an average price of an artwork. And so came up with this, $60,000 annually that we are saying that we would like to fund. And it's a little bit difficult, but what we did was we looked at developments that would be subject to that open space requirement and their square footages. And essentially, it's every year is different because every year has its own number of planning cases, which, sometimes that's a really high year, as we've had lately. And sometimes that's a smaller number of planning cases. And sometimes those planning cases don't come to fruition. And so we tried to pick cases where it was actually coming to fruition, and kind of came up with, if you ladder that out over the square footage, 13 cents a square foot. And what we decided was that, a round number might be easier. So we looked at Lafayette, which also has in their list of all the fees that they have in the building permit and all that, that it's 5 cents a foot. So we're higher than that, but what I think we're suggesting is that it would be 10 cents a foot moving forward, but it would be set by resolution. So it would not be something that we're asking for it to be in 070. And we have other examples of that where we say, we're going to ask a developer to do X, but the actual formula or the actual cost is set by resolution. So in terms of action items, the code requires that for code amendments that are in Title 70, that Planning Commission, which recommends to City Council, consider whether and to what extent the proposed amendments are consistent with the comprehensive plan and other city policies, do not conflict with other provisions of the code or other provisions in the municipal code, are necessary to address a demonstrated community need, are necessary to respond to substantial changes in conditions or policy, and are consistent with the general purpose and intent of this code. So this is implementation of the art master plan that was adopted last year. And so that we think it meets this criteria. It's also mentioned in the comprehensive plan that there would be a public art plan. So it's in accordance with the comprehensive plan from our perspective. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm open to any questions that you may have. I'm sure that there will be particular ones that you have, but we did our best to try to do what you asked us to do. It's a little bit of art, not necessarily science, but think that we'd like to see these public art pieces move forward because I think the public art plan talks about kind of the vibrancy and the placemaking and those kinds of pieces related to livability.
And that was it. Thank you, Jen. Excellent. Any questions to Jen, to staff at this point? And I see hands. I got it finally figured out. So we'll start with Commissioner Zipperly, please.
Hi, thanks for that, Jen. So we're switching away from the 1% of construction costs and switching over to a cents per square foot figure, right?
That's, I think that's what you sort of asked. I mean, I don't know if you asked that exact question, but that was kind of the approach that Planning Commission asked for. So yes, I mean, and it brings the number down quite a bit. So, if you have a proposed triplex and, it's, the square footage is, 3,894, well then, it's 389.40. So it's, as compared with some of those other fees, when we first looked at that 1%, they were in line with and I've got the chart in front of me, but, the parkland dedication or the school land dedication. So it was really high, whereas, the square footage number would be much smaller. And we're saying the gross square footage, I think is what is in that language.
That seems appropriate and like a much more logical sort of cost to impose on developers. I had a couple other notes. One of them was, it says in there about green spaces, and I know we've talked about common open space, but green space, I'm not sure was actually defined, and I'm not sure we should phrase it that way. And I don't remember if I was reading the third document or the staff report when I saw that.
I was just going to ask you if you could point where that is.
I couldn't actually use Civic Clerk. I had to go in through the COGS website to get in to the agenda and the documents. So I couldn't save stuff.
I apologize for that. We, it's been a little bit, we're brand new, switching over to something that, a new kind of iteration of that. So we've had, it's worked pretty well, but it's always challenges when you switch to something brand new.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing that came up is it says that, well, and this isn't again in ours, and I'm not here to pick through the whole 090, but I'm a little concerned that architects, engineers, or designers are not allowed to be artists. I mean, design's kind of vague, and in there it says if you practice design and mostly, then you can't, you're not eligible to be providing any of this art. And I wonder if that's just I
think the idea there is that, and that was the proposed language from the master plan, is more that if you are doing something in terms of landscape architecture, that does not meet your artwork requirement. So if you have kind of a more mass produced but decorative and very lovely fence, that would not meet this criteria. So it's intended to say, I think if an artist creates a decorative fence, and I will use the example that's at Juicy Lucy's, that I think would meet the intent of what it is looking for. But if it's more the kind of landscape architecture, then that doesn't meet this requirement for the public art.
Say, an architect designs a building and they have a great idea for a piece of art that should be outside, and they design a piece of art there, and according to this document, not allowed. That is not acceptable. Specifically excluded.
And I don't know, Richard, if you would weigh in. I think that the intent is that the architect doing things for the architecture, so putting something into the masonry for the building would not meet this requirement. That's the intent.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think we're looking at the definition of artist, right?
Yeah.
And I think the intent is that it's people who day to day for their livelihoods are practicing art, which I know is an ambiguous term in itself. But I think what we're trying to avoid is having, a developer come in and say, hey, architect, just do this for us and we can get around this. We want people who are making their livelihoods in the arts to be the ones whose pieces are chosen, and who aside from the public, but are benefiting from this as well.
So would there be relief from those requirements then? Because you have to turn in sort of your application for what the art is. You know, like if you picture Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, you know, that architect designed all kinds of other art and things that go with the building. And I just worry that that is being made illegal. So I wonder if we have any recourse. Maybe we shouldn't define what an artist is, but rather define what art is not. Like art is not an actual integral part of the building. Art is not, it already says in there that it's not mass produced, like, so you couldn't just buy a fence and call it art. We're defining what an artist is, and I'm not sure we should.
Commissioner Sipperly, I will say that, you know, for the very first meeting that we had out of the gate, the conversations were about, well, can this fence meet their criteria? So I think, you know, it's just even as we've begun to have those conversations with our own projects that we're already wanting to push it into that realm. So I think that is why it's defined the way it is, but certainly we can change it. But I think that I don't think it's our intent, if you are an architect and you are also a sculptor, that the sculpture would not necessarily be allowed to be. It's that the architecture itself is not intended to be.
Right. I completely understand that, but should we put in there like, you know, a method of, you know, the community development director can approve the art kind of clause? No. Okay. The one last thing I saw in the terms of the funding.
Someone else, maybe.
You don't want to do it? In the 090, it referred to some of these monies can be used for maintenance of the art. And I was wondering, like, obviously, if we pay a fee in lieu and the city buys the art, the city does the maintenance, but it doesn't seem to be specified who has to do the maintenance on the art that the contractor might provide. And that could fall to the city if we don't say so. You know, maintenance was mentioned in the whole art plan, but it sort of didn't make it into this component. I know y'all thought we were going to have a short meeting and I wasn't going to ask questions.
Commissioner Sipperly, are you saying that the conservation of public art should not be included in the public art acquisition account definition? I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Right. What I'm saying is it's unclear. So we have the option of pay a fee in lieu, a combination of the two, or provide the art. So say a developer provides the art, it's not actually specified if they have to do maintenance on the art or if the city does maintenance on the art, and maintenance / conservation, I guess.
When it doesn't say, Carolyn, the developer doesn't get that 20%, that goes into the city fund. Wasn't it an 80-20 split or something like that? For maintenance, 20% for maintenance? Did I read that somewhere?
I don't think that it specifies that. I mean, it's certainly something that we can include. I think that the intent is that they provide it on site, that they would maintain it, but we could make that more clear.
That seems appropriate. I mean, if they have the option to pick whatever, obviously the city has to approve it, but maybe it sheds stuff and has to get cleaned up all the time. That shouldn't fall to the city. All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Carolyn. And moving on to, let's see, Joy, please, Commissioner White.
I just had a technical question. Jen, you mentioned this not being a part of 070, but being set by resolution. What exactly does that mean?
So when we do an ordinance and we do these code changes, then it goes into the municipal code, and an ordinance requires 2 readings. And then it's generally 10 days after the publication that it's actually adopted and the code changes. Council can also do legislative items by resolution. And I think that there's information in state law that kind of dictates how that works, and also in the charter and how that part works. So the resolution piece is that it can, city council can do 1 reading. So they, there isn't the 2 reading requirement like there is in the ordinance. So it's a little faster. So if, there needs to be a change, it's 1 resolution. But so they're going to, if this were to be adopted, the code itself would change and say that this is a requirement, but then the resolution piece would be more flexible. City council still has to, put it on their agenda, and they still have to act, but it would just be 1 reading. I don't know, Richard, if you wanted to add anything that was more technical than that.
Yeah, I would just say that all fees, imposed by the city are set by resolution. Oftentimes it's an annual exercise that is done at the very end or very beginning of the year. So it's pretty standard, but it kind of allows us to go through and review all the fees at once. So for administrative purposes, it's quite a bit easier.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Commissioner Schachter, please.
Thank you. Jen, just technically, just to clarify, tonight, we're only being asked to approve the 070 amendment. Is that correct? And the 090 that we see is going to be redrafted to reflect your new fee schedule, and that's approved elsewhere, that we are not concerned with that. Is that correct or not?
Technically, it's correct. Your P&Z has kind of the purview over 070, and obviously is a recommending body to city council. But I think that the 2 pieces function together. So, another example of this in the municipal code is where we have a requirement that there are system improvement fees for water and wastewater. And that piece is in 070, but the actual mechanism and how that piece all works and what an EQR is and all those things lives in 080 in the utility section. So that's essentially what we're doing here. So I think you can't really consider one without the other. So if you have some of those kind of technical items that we'd like to fix before it goes to city council, we would love to hear it. But yes, in particular, 070 is your purview.
And so the 090 that we saw today, that was our attachment, hasn't been rewritten to reflect your 10% your 10 cents per square foot. So this isn't what 090 is going to look like. Is that correct?
This is what, as drafted, this is what we anticipate it would say in 090. And it says that the works of art would be valued at a per square foot cost of gross floor area within the development. And that would be set by resolution. So it's the 2 things. We would put the requirement in the municipal code, and then city council would act with a resolution. So we've done that with short-term rentals, for example, that we change the code and then the fee structure comes with a resolution separately.
So there's no, it's been vetted then by you and Richard that, because I'm reading public art program will be funded by a percentage of construction costs. That's no longer the case, is it?
Well, I thought that
at least on the draft we received. Maybe we received a prior draft.
Well, let me look.
Okay. I'm looking at, yeah. under the funding section. 0908040. And it also refers to 1% still in the publicly funded capital improvement projects.
Well, the one that I'm looking at on the front side of the website does in section 090808030 under funding say it does keep the 1% for capital improvement projects from the city. That
Okay.
part we haven't amended, and city council will weigh in on whether or not they want to do
Right.
that or not. But I think this does say
Maybe-
developer.
Maybe we didn't have the revised draft, or maybe I didn't. I don't see the square footage on mine. But that's okay, because we don't have to approve that tonight. You just have to make sure it's correct. Okay? That's all I have.
I do want to just make sure that there isn't, when we tinker, that we get the right one in there. The one that I'm looking at has, and the planning and zoning commission meeting for today does have that. Does everybody else have that?
Jen, I see it in 040A. It says percentage of construction costs, but then in C11, it talks about square foot. So we need to revise that, I think.
Are you guys looking at the public art master plan dated 07/29/21? Is that what we're talking about?
We are looking at the ordinance that is exhibit.
Draft public art ordinance.
Okay.
And I don't even see Richard on mine under C1, you said?
Yep, C11, the developer of the property shall submit documentation, escrow per square foot.
Yeah, that I see.
And then
I just saw the
cash
first
and-
one.
cash and lieu is,
Just A was what.
right,
I was gonna-
right. So that just needs to be aligned with the rest of that section.
That's all.
So
As
that's-
does the 52-page public art plan.
Well, I think that's already been adopted. So
It says
it's
1%.
right. So the master plan itself has been adopted by resolution. So we're just, we're not following exactly what it says in the master plan. We're just going to do something that's a little bit different because we went through this process, and we're going to recommend something that's not exactly what it says in that document.
Okay.
So I think if you're talking about 90/80/40 funding A, I
yeah,
think that's
Yeah.
intended for the capital improvements projects. So that's for the city piece. And I think we still are recommending 1%. We may need to tinker with it.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a compound. It deals with both construction costs for private development and publicly funded capital improvement projects in the same sentence, Jen. So you may
Okay.
have to split those, is all.
Ah, yes, I see. Okay. Yep. So
but
we
this-
need
this-
to add something to 90/80/40A that
Yeah.
says,
Divides those two, changes.
yeah, divides it, makes it 2 sentences. Good catch.
Yeah. A lucky one. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Sumner. Commissioner Shaver, please.
So I guess I understand from Commissioner Sipler's comments that gargoyles would not qualify as public art. What private development is required to follow this? Is it all public or private development that is required to meet these requirements?
It's anything that would be subject to the open space requirement. And if you'll give me just.
Which is what?
Which is, there's a list, but it's, it excludes 1 and 2 family residences. So like a duplex wouldn't be required to meet this, but a triplex would be. And then it also excludes projects that are in the M2 zoning. If you'll hold on just a second, I'll grab the list.
Good question.
It is, unless new development is expressly exempted, and I'll go through those exemptions below, planned development rezoning, but there wouldn't be a requirement that I think they wouldn't have to provide it. Special use permit, again, it depends on what type of special use review, whether or not they would be proposing a new building as part of that. Major subdivision preliminary plat approval, minor subdivision plat approval, major site architectural plan approval, minor site architectural plan approval, and the exemptions. And I think actually we just went through the exercise and it's not codified quite yet to add the administrative approval. But the exemptions are properties located in the M2 zoning district, condominiumization or subdivision of an existing residential and non-residential unit. So if you had an apartment building and you were converting it, wouldn't require it. And then development of a single family detached or duplex dwelling to an existing one.
That doesn't cover location and extents applications.
You're muted, Jen.
I hit the button, it just didn't work. If the capital improvement piece remains in the code and the city will be doing it at a much higher rate, but you're right, it does not include location and extent projects that would otherwise have, we would ask them to meet the common open space requirement, but they might not.
So what about any kind of project for low income, or however that's termed these days? How does that affect?
It's not currently an exemption, but it's an interesting question, because I do know that the opt-in voluntary program for rent that is at the average of 100, if you opt into that program to be at 100%, average of 100% AMI, other fees are excluded. So that piece is something that could be considered by city council. And maybe Hannah can jump in and help me on the housing regulations, but the regular, like the required ones. So if you have to do the inclusionary zoning, the fees waiver is not part of that. There's other kind of trade-offs of, density and some other things that can happen in that program, but it in particular does not allow for the fee waiver.
So isn't that driving costs in the wrong direction? When we're trying to promote that activity?
So that's one suggestion that, if you would like to see that included, you could exempt those that are subject to the requirements, the inclusionary zoning requirements in 070, 045. I mean, that's something that you could add.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you. Just real quick, I think that's a very good point, George. I think we should definitely think about that. Commissioner White.
Last question I had was, it looks like in the budget, you guys prepare or, project expenses based off of an average of 12,000 plus. Does that include decommissioning art?
It doesn't. We were just looking at, I think that the task that Planning Commission wanted us to do was look at, okay, what is it you're trying to achieve? So if we wanted to achieve 5, what does that look like in terms of cost? I mean, the piece that we did, the tubing, the Colorado piece that's on the North Landing was, far more than $12,000. It was just an average cost based on these other sculptures that are in a rotating exhibit. So I would think that sometimes pieces that are created for a particular place are going to cost more than pieces that would be in a rotating exhibit. Sometimes those are quite heavy and you need a crane to move them, but often that's not the case. So you think about if you are in downtown Carbondale, they have pedestals. So those pieces sometimes are quite large, but they are also movable. So it wouldn't necessarily be, huge pieces. We were just looking at and it's not saying that we would have to buy 5. If you had $60,000 and there, there's a call for art and there was one piece, that is something that could be accomplished. It doesn't say that the fund can't be used for an individual piece.
It was just giving you parameters of a goal park. Of a ballpark goal of what you would like to raise and what costs look like. That makes sense.
Okay, and let's see, Commissioner Connerton, please.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Shaver, for bringing up, how we can be more equitable in this process. But I did have a question, maybe not as, fancy as Commissioner White's. In 90, 80, 40, C3, it says, how, artists are to be pre-qualified. Is there like some place where these pre-qualified artists will be, the list will be kept?
I think that the Arts and Culture Board and our new art coordinator, and not sure that that's her correct title, will be working through those kind of implementation pieces. But I know that the Arts and Culture Board has really been looking at trying to figure out how to make their call for art process. And that was one of the impetuses for there to be a master plan, was the process that we went through for that tubing, the Colorado piece that was funded partially by the NEA. When we did that, we had our very rigid call for art parameters that we got from the regular, procurement processes that we follow at the city. And so they said, we don't think this really works for artists. It turned out great. But I think that that's one of the reasons why the Arts and Culture Board wanted to have this master plan process and so a lot of this language comes from that effort.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Schachter.
No, I would just like to, first of all, thank George for bringing up something that was rattling around in my head. And I would encourage staff to look at a recommendation somehow consistent with our code that would exempt any deed restricted property at 100% AMI or lower from these fees. That's all.
Jen?
Can I ask you a little bit more about that? My question is are you specifically mentioning the ones that are in the inclusionary zoning that are required? Or are you also thinking the voluntary program where?
I'm more concerned about the required, Jen. because those would tend to be bigger projects, or we could end up with a big tax credit project. I'm less concerned about the voluntary ones, but I'd leave it up to you guys to figure out how to coordinate them. But again, it's be the required ones that I'd be most concerned about, because I think that's the most units. I don't know about George. What do you think?
Well, I think just in general, we're trying to encourage that kind of development, and anything that discourages that seems to be heading the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Parsing it out, I'm not sure I'm the one to be weighing in on that.
Commissioner White, you had your hand up.
I did. I was going to actually disagree with what they they said, only in that if they're required to provide the inclusionary housing, I get that we're trying to encourage it as a whole, but if they're already going to develop, I feel like giving a further tax break, just, I don't know. I'm for the arts, so I love to see that we're making this a priority. I would almost opt to say if it's somebody voluntarily entering the program, to give them more incentive.
Commissioner Zipperly.
I agree with you there, Joy. I think it's, if you're required, it's, you're already getting sort of some bonuses. If it's voluntary, that you participate in the inclusionary housing, I think those are the people we want to attract with this sort of waiver. On the other hand, are we going to be creating low-income housing with no art? I mean, poor people deserve art too. They deserve houses more than they deserve art, probably. But if you had 100 units going in and a certain number are deed restricted, then would you just subtract the unit square footage out of the whole building square footage? I mean, the whole development wouldn't be exempted from the art requirement, right? You would think just a per square footage of free market space, but does that have to be defined in here?
Well, I would look at excluding anything that's under 100% or less AMI, which in a partial building would not exclude a lot of the units. But in a big building that might be tax credit building or some major project, it might exclude all of them. I don't know how you word that, Jen, but that would be a thought for council to consider.
Just a quick follow-up here. The voluntary program is at 100% AMI. When we require the inclusionary housing, what is the AMI set there?
Is it an average of 100, Jen? I don't know.
Is it also 100? Is it always at 100?
It wasn't as low as I think a lot of us wanted.
Right, I remember that, but what is it?
Hannah, can you please help? Because I know that there are various things.
Yes, just for my clarification, can you restate the most recent question?
For me? Okay, what?
Yes, thank you.
The voluntary inclusionary housing is at 100 AMI. I know that out of experience.
Yes, it
Where
is.
is the required inclusionary AMI set?
The required inclusionary zoning program also has the average at 100% AMI.
Average, so you can
Yes.
have 80s and 120s as long as you average out at 100.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So thank you. With that heard, I would agree with Commissioner Zipperly. Hang on just a second, George. And I would completely agree that we subtract the fee for the inclusionary housing, whether it's required or whether it's voluntary, but required obviously only for the units that are being proposed as part of the proposal. George?
So it's my understanding that this art is placed on public property. Is that correct?
Not all.
I think the public art that is purchased with public funds would be on public property or in an easement. I can imagine that there's a time where I don't know exactly what the development would be, but that it would either be on our own property in a park or, or potentially maybe like the Rio Grande Trail, but that it would be in an easement. But I think that the development itself, if they put it on site, they would be putting it actually on their development. And I think that you all raise a great question about if the developer provided art on that property would be city property or not. I mean, I think that there was a question there. So I don't know if you have thoughts about that. I was assuming that if they're providing it, it is more like the Tanazi birds that are at Alpine, right? That those are, that it's part of their development and it's on their property.
Okay, but there's nothing saying that the public art could not be placed in a development that had, this requirement or a voluntary program in the right of way, for instance. I mean, we don't necessarily exclude poor people from having public art by not placing, not having the option to place it near where that development is. For instance, whatever it is up in Wolfson, there could be public art placed in the right of way or something in that area.
Or in an easement if they would grant us one. I mean, I can see that, if you had a developer who was building, an art building, or they were building a theater or something like that, that they might invite those kinds of placements of either rotating or permanently installed art in an easement.
Could that be an option then for a required low-income housing scenario for the developer to grant an easement to place art, even though they wouldn't be required to pay for the art and drive the cost? Is what I'm getting at. Does that make sense?
I am going to ask that question of Richard, if that could be a requirement of the development if you don't have a discretionary act.
So you're saying if it's not, we're not making it a condition of approval.
Well, we could make it a condition of approval, but do we need to put that in here in that kind of exaction section?
Probably, because it would end up being a dedication to the city. It would be like a open space dedication.
If this is public art and yet a developer has the option to do their own on their property, wouldn't we, and there's likely to be succession of property owners, and I think Carolyn brought up the maintenance portion. Wouldn't we want all this quote unquote public art to be owned by the city by one way or another, dedication or right away in perpetuity, even if the developer puts it on their property?
And within public view.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have a courtyard where you have public art that's not even accessible.
I think the public view is already in there, George, but what happens in perpetuity and maintenance wasn't very clear. And could that be a condition as part of it, Richard or Jen? And why wouldn't it be?
I think it could be. I would think that we would need more review of art selection if the city is going to accept ownership of a piece.
Commissioner Zipperly?
Sumner, that brings to mind, well, not only the maintenance of an art placed on private property, but we haven't specified the duration of that work of art. Like, what if it is on private property and they want to switch it out every year? Are we precluding them from doing that? Do they have to, I would assume, apply again every time they switch out the art? Or can they put it in, feel like they've met their requirements and get it out of there in a year? We haven't said it has to remain. So that sort of ties in with the maintenance and the ownership of it. I don't know if the city really wants the responsibility of going on private property and maintaining art.
We could require some type of covenant related to how long a piece would stay, short of the city owning it.
Okay, a lot was said. Any other questions or discussion while we're at it? If not, then I would like to circle back to Commissioner Zipperly's first comment about precluding of architects. I personally think they should not preclude it from being able to add a piece of art to one of their designs or developments or whatever you want to call it. I think we might need a little more language that says it cannot be part of the building, part of a landscape plan or anything like that. But I've seen some really cool stuff where the architect kind of built it into the building and it was semi-attached, but it was really a piece of art, whether it was sticking out or, I don't know, ground level and attached first level, whatever. I think it should be required for review, whatever it is, but I wholeheartedly believe that they should have the right to add a piece to the application as a separate application, I guess, within an application. There you go. Reason being, I'm not saying we're going to see better art, but I've seen this art project over the last few years, and I don't know, I'm hoping for a little different outcome in the future, maybe with a little more, I don't know. Anyway, I think architects should not be precluded from adding art to a development, handled via a separate application. That's how I see it. So I don't know where that leaves us with what we have in front of us, because it seems like we have quite a few changes and additions.
And
Could I
Marco,
Can I try to sum up?
So you want to get it done? Is that what you're saying?
well, just one second, Marco, I just Googled because of you, and there are technical terms like relief sculpture when art is integrated into the wall, stuff like that I think you're talking about.
Like I think George said, gargoyles are not part of it, but if it's applied for and it's considered to be a separate piece integral to the development, I think it should be looked at. I really do. I think that was
if it's a gargoyle that functions as a scupper draining the roof, clearly that's architecture, right?
That's definitely architecture.
If it's a gargoyle that represents, something, then I don't know. I think there's a gray area there.
There is a gray area, gargoyle wise. Just don't ever stand under a roof in Paris that has gargoyles, because you will get wet. So anyway, Jen, yes, please try to sum up and see if we can agree.
I'm going to do my very best. So changing the definition in 090, 080, 010, C, excluding that sentence that starts with the purposes of this document, artists shall not include persons primarily working in the professional fields of architecture, engineering, design, or landscaping. So striking that. And changing the funding section in 090, 080, 040, A, to include costs for private development as a cost per square foot and a percentage of the cost of publicly funded capital improvement projects. And also similarly, but in a different section, D. D, where it also says percent for art in private development. So funding from the art and private development and percentage for art capital improvements projects. So fixing that one. Putting into 070, 040, 030, G6 public art, new developments subject to the common open space requirements within section 704040 shall provide public art through on-site artwork, cash in lieu, or a combination as set forth in section 908040C, with an exception for deed restricted square footage. So the units that are deed restricted to 100% AMI would be excluded from the requirement, and that the developer shall dedicate the piece to this. This is me summing up, not quite sure. Developer shall dedicate to this city the public art, but shall enter into a maintenance agreement with the city so that the developer is maintaining that. And that there be a covenant for how long the piece would be on site.
I think that works. I just have one question. When it comes to the architect removal or not removal or engineer, whatever, does it say in there, and I just do it for the record, does it say in there that it cannot be part of the building or landscaping plan? Does anybody feel we need to say that now that we're kind of giving them free hand a little bit?
It does say in public art, in the definitions, it says objects that are mass produced of standard design, such as banners, signs, playground equipment, benches, statuary, that's the gargoyle, street or sidewalk barriers or fountains. So it does not satisfy the requirement. Reproduction by mechanical or other means of original artwork, so that doesn't count. Decorative, architectural, or functional elements that are designed by the building architect or landscape architect, as opposed to an artist commissioned for the purpose. So if the architect is commissioned for the purpose and it's just a gargoyle, I think it probably counts. Landscape architecture or gardening, except where these elements are designed by an artist and are integral part of a work of art. So I think there is that piece that's already in there.
I think it sounds like it. Okay. Big question. Everybody clear on what we're doing?
And in that scenario, Jen, they would still need to seek approval, and that language is in there, correct? Yes. Okay. Because I agree with Marco, but I also agree with what Richard was saying, which is we really truly want this to be something that benefits the art community and not just a savvy architect that can, cut costs by throwing an art piece together to fulfill a requirement.
And that is not my intent whatsoever, Joy, at all. I'm really more referring to the inner arts person in an architect of,
Right. Excluding an architect sounds very punitive to the darn architect.
A little. Now, excluding an engineer is a different story, but the architect should be
attorneys absolutely excluded.
That's right. You got it.
Heck no.
You got it.
I will note that Carl does have a bachelor's in fine arts. So.
Very good. Okay, so if everybody is clear on what we're doing, I do believe we should open the public portion here quick, since this is a continued public hearing. Anybody from the public like to comment on planning file 5721? Raise your hand. I see nobody. We'll close the public portion. Excellent. Bring it back to the commission, entertaining a motion in planning file 5721, part 3, public art master plan implementation, with all the changes and additions that we have just come up with and Jen so beautifully repeated and kind of put together for us. So entertaining a motion. Let's see. The staff recommends approval.
I move to approve item 5721, part 3, as discussed in our meeting, along with the action items and recommendations on page 3 of the staff report.
And 4.
And a little bit of 4, yep.
A little bit of 4. Okay, excellent. So we have a motion to approve with all the changes and all the good stuff. So,
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? Did the person who's taken notes, did they get the first and the second, who it was and all that? Okay, excellent. I know we had some issues in the past. So anyway, any more discussion? George, Commissioner Shaver, please.
Well, I want to say that I'm all in favor of public art. I always we've enjoyed it in the numerous communities that we've been in. It's just fun to walk around and see that. My problem with the way this is funded is I think that we are putting too much burden on development. I mean, it just seems like development is the easy target that we go to. And even though we've excluded these areas that we discuss for the inclusionary housing, which I think is absolutely necessary in this, we're impacting the development sector of our economy, which I think is only going to drive and cause inflationary forces into that part of our economy, which I don't think that's what we're wanting to do, because we're trying to get people to be able to afford real estate and not go the other way. And the other side another side of it is that public art is something that is enjoyed by everyone, not just the people that are going to be developing or living in new developed properties. And so a much more equitable way in my mind to fund this would be through a taxing district, which I'm sure the council doesn't want to have anything to do with trying to create another taxing district. It's going to be way too cumbersome and problematic. You know, a possible place that could be gone to, and Joy might be able to help me on this. As far as I know, there aren't any real estate transfer taxes that exist in our town. And it seems to me that would be an alternative to a general taxing district, something more easily implemented and maybe more equitable, because it would eventually go across all of the community. Over time, some properties will not be sold for many, many years, but there is a greater turnover, I think, in that area than there is in just the development. So I'll get off my high horse now and step back, but I'm just concerned about burdening new development. It just seems like we're heading down the wrong road. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaver. Good point, actually. I don't know enough about the real estate transfer tax, but it'd be interesting to find out. Commissioner Schachter.
Well, I agree with George that development, this is counterproductive. My understanding, and Richard confirmed, is you can't do a real estate transfer tax anymore. That, you know, Pitkin County and Aspen got away with it, but you can't do that anymore by statute. And so I don't know another option. But the other thing, just technically, I'm wondering, everything has been already basically approved by council. We're just putting 070 in. I don't know if if we turn it down, I don't know what that happens to the other two phases, the creating of the master plan and the tentative approval of the ordinance. I don't know how much leeway we even have here, I don't know of another solution at this point, George, but I agree we're putting that burden there.
Yeah, I don't think that anything is going to come of this. I just want to go on record of saying that I think we're pushing in the wrong way.
Jen might have some insight.
So when the city council adopted the resolution adopting the master plan, they were adopting kind of all of the pieces and parts, including the recommendations, but it wasn't the implementation. So that's this phase. So city council could still say no to this piece. It could still say no to all of it. It could say, we'll fund this a different way. Or, you know, I don't think they'll probably say that they don't want to have any public art funding at all, because we, you know, moved in that direction. But I think it's still in consideration, and it was a separate piece. So I think that they have said that, yes, public art is important, and this master plan is important, and having some of these big ideas that came out of the master planning process is important, and having somebody who is the public art administrator is important. All of those sorts of things are important, but the implementation is still, you know, we're working through that process. So they could still say no, for sure.
And 60,000 could come out of the general fund if they chose to do that. Is that correct?
They could, and I don't know those numbers off the top of my head. There was public art funding that was in the 2021 budget. I'm not certain exactly what happened in the 2022 budget, because I do think that some of this was sort of anticipated. But you know, for example, we will economic development will be funding a call for art for what we call the Topex, which are the little dining, the white little wooden structures that are on the North Landing and under the bridge. So they're going to do a call for art for those, and we'll provide the funding for that. So and that will be, you know, it's general fund dollars.
Okay, any more discussion? No, see none. We have a motion and a second. Oh, Commissioner White, please.
Apparently I'm a contrarian tonight. I definitely, though I do not want to stymie development on any level, I think that, you know, if we're growing leaps and bounds, I think this is just an extension of preserving our community and ensuring that we're a beautiful community with the development. Though a transfer tax is not even an option, I feel like individual families are already burdened enough to find affordable housing here. So spreading the cost to the individual families trying to have attainable housing, to me, doesn't make sense. I think the developers are coming in and they're finding that our community is lucrative. And so to me, the cost to them seems appropriate. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, Commissioner Schachter.
Well, again, it's a question. Let's say for argument's sake, this gets approved as the motion is carried. How is the concern, whether it be the minority or all of us, that the burden on developers might be too onerous, and that council consider other funding, even though we're in favor of the master art plan and most of the ordinance? How does that get conveyed without us voting it down or making a different condition?
Well, I think that you could make that part of the motion if you, the motion is really about the code amendment. But we also, or you could do it as separately, maybe on the resolution piece, or part of this motion. I think that we're taking the comments for the motion, for the recommendation, for both 90 and 70. So if there is something that you would like to see that is represented in that piece, or the elimination of 70, 40, 30 G6 public art. I mean, that is the piece that is really before you tonight. If you didn't want that to happen, then maybe you could say I think that it's either part of this motion or it's a subsequent motion, maybe on the resolution. That's kind of the fee piece.
Just quick reference, and I'm sure you guys went through this, I just kind of missed it, but let's look at the lofts. How many square feet were in the lofts? Does anybody know, roughly, approximately? If we had a square footage calculation of how much they would have had to pay, how much would it be?
I don't have the lofts because they are in the M2, but Six Canyon, it's 145,831 square footage, and Bell Rippey is 113,260. And those are I just pulled the square footage off the plans. I would have to make sure that's the gross square footage, so that it's an approximate. It might be slightly off based on the, whether that was livable or.
I'm sorry, what was the square footage?
113.
Bell Rippey is 113,260, and that's across 6 buildings.
113,000 square feet?
113,000.
Okay, so the 1%.
$11,000.
$11,000.
And the 1% would have been $175,000 and change. So this is a much smaller number than.
Very nominal for, I mean, it's money, but it's compared to the whole cost. I think it's a very nominal requirement.
What is a park fee for something like that? I know you have it. I'm just curious to compare. I mean, park's one thing, art's another, but both could go together. So
For Bell Rippey, it was $414,000 and change.
Wow.
Park fee.
Parkland.
Okay. Dedication. And I'm sorry, did you give us the Bell Rippey art number?
It was assuming that my square footage is right, so a little more than $11,000.
Okay. I have no concerns whatsoever.
Pretty minimal.
Yep.
When you look at the gross numbers, it's pretty small.
And, I think that where we started, and I think this, the conversation was that at 1%, it was equal to some of these larger fees.
Right. Yeah, I have no concern. Thank you. But thanks for voicing.
On the other side of that, then, what would be the projection? Is there a projection of what the gross numbers would be coming out of public funds, the public funding on that side of it? Any idea what we spend in a normal year on the improvements that would fall under this? Capital expenditures?
Well, I think most years, a lot of the projects are kind of maintenance type, and I think that that's excluded here. But if you have a bigger project, such as the 27th Street Bridge, where you're talking about, a $13 million project, then it would, whether or not City Council goes forward with that, but it would be 1% of that would be toward the public art.
Well,
and it's the reason that Southbridge is excluded, because Southbridge is very.
We could build a museum.
Oh, Riverview was a project this year. What was the cost of that? And any idea? Cardinal, they did Cardinal and up in the West Glenwood last year. Those are significant projects for the year.
How about Solstice?
Let me see if I can find the answer to that question, George.
And Jen, why was M3 specifically excluded from that?
It's the recommendation was for this in the public art master plan. It tied it to the common open space requirement, and M2 is excluded. We do have an M3 zone, but we don't have anything zoned M3. I am not immediately finding the cost of those projects. I apologize.
George, was there anything else?
No.
Okay. Okay, so we seem to have opened another this small discussion. Is there anything else about the what we just talked about from you guys, or can we move on with voting? Sumner's nodding. George, you good? Okay, so motion is second to approve with all the changes we made tonight. I call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 And those opposed? And we'll hear none. So thank you. Jen, did you take count of that or somebody?
I did. Thank you.
Okay, Hannah did. Excellent. Thank you, Hannah. Excellent. Thank you, guys. That was it for planning file 5721. Moving on to continued item B, discussion on city council board and commission special meeting. Right. And I think that's Hannah.
Thank you. Nice to see commissioners tonight. So this is a special meeting that City Council has requested with all of the boards and commissions that we have at the city, which are numerous, and they have requested a representative from each board come and discuss the questions that I sent out in an email with them. I did get a couple of responses from you guys, and that is what the summary attachment is. So I hope everyone had a chance to look at that. Our representative, I believe, as we discussed at our last meeting, would be Marco, our chair.
I did not hear that.
We can discuss that appointment if you'd like, but really, the summary attachment to your report here sums up the answers to the questions. Planning and Zoning Commission is a little interesting in answering some of these questions in that your guys' focus is pretty clear in what you do. And obviously you take up different topics and trends that you see. So I tried to capture that in this summary of what you want your focus to be for the next year. And if you think your focus should change, P&Z doesn't really change their focus so much as just tackles the next issue in a long line of world problems that need to be solved for the community. So good job, you guys, keep it up. So I wanted to really open this up for discussion on that summary document so that everyone is kind of on board with what the representative will present to City Council on the 27th. It is a very short presentation, 10 minutes, and then 5 minutes for question and answer with council. So it's not a whole lot of time to discuss, larger concepts. But if you guys have comments on that summary, and then we can officially decide who our representative is going to be at that meeting.
Thank you, Hannah. Quick question. When you said a couple of us wrote in comments, may I ask how many?
A couple, two.
Okay. How about the rest? I'm looking around the Zoom thing, the little squares. This is your time.
I honestly don't recall getting it. I'm sure I did, but maybe I was out of town.
Probably. We seem to do that, Joy, right? Yeah. Okay, well, this is your time. Did you guys read through it? What do you guys think? Should we and if this was City Hall, I'd say let's start chatting, but Zoom is a little weird, so if you could raise your hand still, that'd be great, just so we don't have overlapping audio. Commissioner Shaver, please.
Well, it looks to me like this is, exactly what we have in front of us for the upcoming year. I think it was a slam dunk for our response to what the council was asking for. And some of the questions really didn't apply unless we can ask them for funding for beer or something like that. But I mean, the funding part didn't seem to make any sense. But
No beer, but Christmas party food could come back into action here at some point.
yeah, but I think this is perfect. Oh, and I want to nominate Marco, if we're at that.
Yeah, as you go along.
Hannah, the only thing, and
Commissioner Schachter, go.
sorry, Hannah, the only thing, and maybe it's semantics in the last paragraph of section A. I'm wondering if it would be appropriate or necessary to put in a word or two actually specific that the commission's desire for these workshops, and a lot of this is to emphasize the planning part of our role. And I think it subtly addresses that. I wonder if we should explicitly address that.
Not a bad point at all. So
I did
we
want
don't
to make
actually-
one point.
sorry, go ahead.
Yep. So this has already been submitted into the packet. And so we certainly, the representative can bring up some small changes. If there were some glaring issues that you guys found with this, we could possibly submit, an addendum for them to view.
I'm sure Chairman Dame will be able to address that.
I'll make sure that he, whoever he may be.
What are we making sure of?
That you'll be able to address that when you represent us at the meeting.
Oh, well, I think I do want to point out that, most of the time we're a zoning police, and that's all we do. And it gets a little, but yes, those workshops, good point, Sumner. Those were reinstated, in my opinion, to do a little more planning and a little more visionary work that we're all really good at, and I think we should do it more. So I will make a point that's oh God, I guess I just accepted the nomination. So I think it's important that we point out that we want to plan. Let us plan for the next couple of decades. Let's think ahead. But anyway, any other comments on the beautifully crafted document, Hannah? Anybody? No. Commissioner
I'm going to nominate Chairman Dame as our representative, and he'll be glad to talk to the council briefly about planning as well.
I'll second that. He gets to talk about this one document for 10 minutes.
I'm just going to have to go very slow. And to avoid the question and answer game, I'm going to have to go really slow. Is this a Zoom thing too?
Yes.
Oh, you got to be. Okay. All right. That's what it is. Okay. Do we need to, is there an action with this? Do we need to do anything?
No, this was more for discussion and to confirm that we had someone a willing participant to represent January 27th. And I will send out a reminder to you to put that on your calendar.
And please send me the Zoom link as always.
Yes. I apologize, but I will have to send it to you as a Zoom link.
Your tentative time is around 6:15, Marco.
Approximately. You know that already.
Because I got cornered for another commission.
Oh, I see. I'll see you there then.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, got it. Okay, cool. Well, if there's no more discussion, we'll leave it alone, and I'll learn it by heart, and then I'll go from there. So, excellent. Thank you, Hannah. Okay, that was it. Commissioner comments. Nothing too exciting on the agenda tonight, but we'll start with Commissioner Schachter.
No, I'll pass. I've said enough tonight. Thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaver.
Ditto.
Thank you, Commissioner Connerton.
As I'm getting my feet wet, I appreciate that you guys are letting me learn as I go.
Absolutely. That's how it works. Commissioner Zipperly.
Nothing really, just thanks for all being here.
Commissioner White.
I just have a quick question. On those emails we get from people who are concerned about developments and we're copied on all of them, protocol is we don't respond, correct?
That's what I've done in the past. I don't know where you get them. I hardly ever get any, which is okay. But I usually forward them to the Community Development Department.
I think Emery's getting copied on all of them and they're being
Okay.
sent to all of us. But Richard, that's correct. Don't respond.
Yeah, that would be my advice, not to respond. And then, you know, while we have access to your email accounts, I think it is good for open records purposes for community development staff to have all those collected together, because if there is a pending application, we want those to be included in the record of any quasi-judicial proceeding.
Excellent. And Commissioner West.
It's my last meeting. Thanks, guys.
Wait,
fun.
not February?
I think it's today.
Is
told me
today my
that?
last one or is February my last one?
Hannah, did you say it was today?
Today's my last one?
What?
Yes.
Not your last one, just mine.
I move to extend all appointments to, I don't know, another 10 years.
You will both
Really?
be so missed.
It's been a fun learning experience. I like to
Okay.
come back when my kids have give me a little more time. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
You're doing great work.
Thank you, Ben. Commissioner Wissing is the last one.
This feels unfair.
Why?
Well, because we're losing both Ben and Sumner tonight, right now.
I suppose so.
Yes, so.
Should I deliver like a eulogy or something?
No.
Do you have one
Been
prepared?
awesome.
No,
Thank you.
I don't have one prepared, but I'm sure I could fail at it. Well, thanks all. I think, well, we'll miss you both. And I think thanks all for doing great work for our community all the time. So.
Thank you. Well, I was not prepared for this at all, but I want to thank you both for your efforts. Both of you, very invaluable. I truly enjoyed every meeting with both of you. And I thought that was next month.
So did I.
So you will be missed tremendously. Sorry to see you guys go, but I guess rules are rules. Not much we can do, but I'm sure we'll see you where? Housing Commission, Sumner, and Ben, you're going to pick up another commission somewhere?
At some point, yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Well, again, thank you. Thank you all. Excellent points made tonight. I love it when we expand on discussions and come up with what I call a better solution with everything. So thank you very much. Community, no, what are you? You are the assistant city manager. Update coming up.
Well, I am very sad to see you go. We read the code and it is very clear about when the terms start. And so we're sad to lose you both. And of course, happy to have so Amy Connerton and Pete Waller are the permanent folks who will start in February in their permanent seats. And we have two new, Jim Hardcastle and Mitchell Weimer were interviewed and appointed to the alternate seats. So we are still a full planning commission, which is very exciting. So we are working to find a time to do the onboarding meeting for our new folks. And I don't know that that will happen before the February 8th meeting. We are asking for a meeting to do some code changes before your comp plan steering committee work session. So it's at 5 on the 8th that we're asking for you all to meet. And we do have confirmation that 4 of you can do that. So thank you for making that special time for us. And I think that's all I have.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Oh, Commissioner Zipper. No. Okay. Yeah, we're losing a couple of guys and it's over Zoom. It just drives me absolutely insane. But anyway, thank you all. And if I don't hear any more comments, this meeting is adjourned. Hannah? Last second there.
Yes. Well, I also wanted to say thank you so much to Commissioner Schachter and Commissioner West. It's been great working with you. And I'm sure we will rope you back into something very soon. So just expect that. We've got you on the radar. And for upcoming meetings, as usual, we do have full agendas. So thank you so much for those commissioners that got back and are able to attend that extra meeting. Very important. So if anything comes up, please do keep me in the loop if you are unable to attend that meeting so we can make sure that we do have a quorum. And as usual, I also am sad that we're doing this over Zoom. So Marco, I pledge to you that there will be something forthcoming that is more celebratory to make this a better event. That's all I've got.
Absolutely. And on top of that, it's 7:45, so it's before 8. So Richard, save your pennies. The rule is we finish before 8, the attorney pays. We will all get together and give him a
Wait. Ben and I get to partake in that.
Absolutely, of course. Of course.
Yeah, I feel like there's a backlog now.
There is a couple, I think. You're absolutely right. So we will figure something out. I'm sure Hannah's crafty hand at scheduling will come up with something. So excellent. Nothing else. This meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening. See you next time.